Tonight, we are talking further about the implications this historic ruling will have. We have legal analyst Dan Eaton joining us now. Dan, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight.
Good to be with you, Marcel.
So under your hands right there is the entire opinion. I don't know many people who've printed it out and have actually read it front side and back side. What's your main takeaway from reading this?
Well, the main takeaway, Marcella, for one thing, is that the final opinion really tracked the draft very closely, except for responding to the dissent and the concurring opinion. The other thing is that Chief Justice Roberts, as predicted, did not join the majority in voting to overrule Roe versus Wade. That why it's more precise to say this was a 5-1-3 decision because he agreed that Mississippi law could stand. That was what was interesting. But the fact of the matter is that this is going back to the states.
So 49 years later, we're seeing implications enacted immediately. In some states, abortions were halted right after that ruling came down. What do these women, what are their options now?
Well, the interesting thing, of course, is that a woman with means can go to another state. And that was one of the interesting things in Kavanaugh's concurring opinion, which is a really interesting opinion. It's only about 11 pages long, and only Constitutional Geek is going to read it. But it is a fascinating thing. Why? Because it talks about things that are off the table. It said states cannot prosecute women who go to other states for abortion. Why? Because there's a constitutional right to interstate travel. That is off the table. There's also a very interesting footnote in Kavanaugh's concurrence that suggests that a woman probably will retain the right to an abortion across the board if her life is in jeopardy, because you're talking about competing interests here. One is the prenatal right to life, and on the other hand, you have a woman's interest in privacy and her right to life itself. So there are competing interests here.
So California Governor Gavin Newsom, as we just mentioned, was very quick to respond to this ruling, wanting women seeking abortion to know that they can come here to California, also offering protections for providers from being sued. And that goes to what you were saying about the right to cross into another state and have an abortion legally.
Well, yes, except that there is an issue of these states that are going to sue in their own state courts, and they're going to seek judgments they're going to seek to enforce in California. And there's a bill out there, there's a measure out there that says we're not going to enforce them in California. The problem with that, of course, is Article 4, Section 1 of the Constitution, full faith and credit, that says you're supposed to respect what state courts do. So it's going to be fascinating. Look, this is the Supreme Court's latest statement on abortion. It won't be the last.
The justices who ruled in favor of overturning Roe v. Wade say that abortion rights are not protected in the Constitution. They say it's a constitutional issue, not a right to have an abortion issue. But what larger implications could this have on other rights?
Well, that's a great question. And you know, it's one that's specifically addressed both by Justice Alito in his majority opinion and Justice Kavanaugh in this fascinating concurring opinion. They say this has nothing to do with these other rights. Why? Because when you're talking about abortion, you are talking about competing interests. On the one hand, you have a woman's right. On the other hand, you have the right of potential life. They don't say that they don't recognize a right of the fetus to life. In fact, Kavanaugh goes out of his way to say the Constitution does not protect fetal life as far as that goes, because if it did, of course, then California couldn't even guarantee the right of a woman to terminate pregnancy. So that's the bottom line. They say same-sex marriage is not the same as a right to an abortion because they're competing interests when you're talking about abortion with respect to the woman and the natal life that are not at stake when you're talking about the right to contraception and you're talking about the right to same-sex marriage.
It seems like there are a lot of conflicting outcomes that come from these opinions, and we were just going to have to wait and see and follow the journey.
Wait and see is a good watchword, Marcia.
It's going to be a long time.
It will be.
All right. Thanks so much, Dan, for joining us today.
Good to be with you.
Legal expertise, having read through that whole court opinion.
That was fun, though.
Incredible.
For me.
Thank you, Dan.